Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Rocky. You're listening to The World According to Rocky, and I'm your host, Rocky Miller. I hope everybody is out there having a wonderful, wonderful day. We're about to get started on what is a very special broadcast tonight. We have a candidate that is running for office, and he wants to introduce himself to our audience, and I want to thank him for coming on. But I also want you guys to participate by, if you have any comments, any questions, please put it in the comments, and we'll get the question we'll get the candidate to answer the question. So I want this to be a really interactive podcast and live stream. So I want your feedback. I want the feedback from the audience. But with no further ado, I'd like to bring in the the Democratic candidate for District 22, Robert Vick. How's it going today, Robert?
It's doing great, Rocky, and thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your campaign reaching out to me and to communicate with the listeners and my followers and friends that listen to my podcast. It's very important, I think, for candidates to that are running for office to share their message and their platform with as many people as possible from all walks of life. And so I appreciate your campaign making a effort to communicate with our audience. And so I just want to I haven't I bring local candidates and also public officials on from time to time. And so what I like to do, Robert, is kind of get them to, like, before we get into talking about policies and platforms and all that kind of stuff, I want you to tell me, who is Robert Vick as a person?
Well, I'm a bunch of things. I'm like everybody else. I've got a lot of pieces and sides to me. But I've never been a political candidate. Never really wanted to. I've worked in the background. I've been a county chair before, and I've worked on campaigns before. But I finally reached a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. I'm old enough to remember the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And I can't believe that we're still having these same discussions and same fights 55 years later. And I just got really tired of it. And our representative, our little Senate District 22, in case you don't know, is Bosque County, Ellis County, Falls County, Hood County, Johnson County, Somerville County, McClellan County, Hill County, Navarro County, and part of Tarrant County. And it was gerrymandered for a specific purpose. The reason part of Tarrant County, that's around 360 and Interstate 20 in Tarrant County.
Wow.
And Grand Prairie.
That's a long way away.
Arlington. Yeah. And the reason it was done that way is we all know that Tarrant County is the last urban area in Texas that's still Republican. Well, it's that way because they took 150,000 voters in Tarrant County and put them in with Hood County and with Somerville County, so that they oftentimes gerrymander to make candidates an office, a place to be. But this is to keep somebody from being there. And so what they've done is they've just really gerrymandered us up. And we have a state senator who is a very special interest oriented. He receives all of his money from political action committees and special interests, very little money. In fact, over the last 6 months, he's only had 6 contributions from individuals in these 10 counties, but yet has a $700,000 war chest. Well, that $700,000 war chest is to keep anybody from running against him. Well, it didn't work for me because I'm running against him because I think we've got a story that needs to be told, and there's something we can do better. So that's kind of the district. And then, why I'm in it. I was a small businessman for a number of years. And before that, I worked in economic development, worked in Texas, city and local governments working on economic development, attracting jobs and industry to Texas. And I think we can do better there too.
Yeah, we
So that's
definitely
kind of it.
go ahead. We definitely can do better. When I think about what's going in this great state, and us Texans are really proud to be Texans, and we have a lot to be proud about. But when you think about how we as Texans we rank 43rd in public education, uh, 37th in healthcare, and 47th when you talk about access to healthcare, and then we have the largest prison population in all of the nation. When you think about all those things, though we should be proud to be Texans, that leaves us with a lot of room to grow and improve as a state. And when you think about all of those things are about what's happening here in our local elections. You know, when you talk about incarceration, access to health care, and all those things, those are things that are not mandated by the national elections or dictated by the senators and things of that nature. That those things are dictated by our state legislature. So for me, not only as a Democrat, but also as a Democrat that is the president of the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats in McLennan County, it's very important to me that our values are represented as the Democratic Party within the state legislature now. But none of those statistics that I gave you reflect that the Republicans have any concern of they don't often complain about or address those issues. They seem to not have a problem with them, and they don't put any legislation on the floor to address them. And a lot of times, they put in policy to actually make them worse. How do you feel about that?
Well, they do, and they've built a system to ensure that it stays that way. Let me give you a good example. Texas has what's called the rule of 3/5 in the Senate, which means that 19 senators must agree on a piece of legislation before it's even brought to the floor. Now, that passed years and years ago as a way for minorities and rural people to have some say so. You know, we have 10 counties and one senator. The Metroplex has 4 or 5 senators altogether. So to keep the rural areas and the smaller areas and minorities from being overrun, they created this rule of 3/5 that you have to agree. 19 senators have to agree to bring it to the floor. And things worked great for years until we got out of balance. And now there are 19 Republican senators in the Senate. So what happens is no matter what the House does, no matter what they propose, it all goes straight to the Senate and goes into committee because it has to be rewritten to appease those 19 senators.
It doesn't come out of committee.
It doesn't go anywhere at all. You can use teachers as an example. If you remember when they proposed the first teacher raise, it was $10,000. It got through the House, it was $5,000. It got to the Senate, it went nowhere. They rewrote it. It became $2,000. So that's the way that they've been working, and they've been not addressing these issues. But like you said, we're at the bottom on virtually everything, especially on public education and the way we treat our retired teachers. We talk often about Texas exceptionalism, how great we are and how great we should be. And we should be. We've got the resources to do it. We just don't have the will to do it. I know that going in as a senator, if I get elected a senator, I'm not going to take us from 37th in funding for public education to first in one session. That's not going to happen. But if we're not going to try, and let's try to reach the middle. How about let's just shoot for 25 of the 50 states. Let's just go for the middle and let's set a goal. Let's go 25 in the year 25. Let's just become in the middle on everything. Let's at least make progress in the right direction. That's what we've got to do, Rocky.
As we lag behind in public education, it seems to be the policy of our legislature to find ways to reduce or lessen the state's burden in helping out school districts. And that's one of the things that's very unfortunate to me. We brag about the economic prosperity that we're having in Texas. However, we don't want to use any of those resources from that booming economic prosperity to create a better public education system for our children. Our children are our future, but it seems to me that our state legislature and even our governor, for that matter, does not want to do much to ensure that all Texans have a bright future.
No, that's really true, including the guy I'm running against, Senator Birdwell. He constantly introduces legislation to do student savings programs, to go with vouchers. They've done everything they can to really suppress and put down the public education so that then they can say, oh, well, see, it's not working very well. Let's don't fund it. But, even talking about property tax and talking about the taxes in Texas and stuff, we always say, oh, gosh, there's a $5 billion deficit in public education because we don't have enough money to fund it. What are we going to do? We can't come up with $5 billion. Well, yeah, you really could. You really could come up with $5 billion pretty darn easy if you would just do the right thing. And a couple of the right things are expanding health care. Texas is one of 16 states that has not expanded Medicaid. Now, in addition to the 1.7 million people who are going without health insurance that could go without health insurance, Texas, everybody that goes to the hospital that can't pay their hospital bill, the local county and the taxpayers pick up that bill. If you look at that bill for unreimbursed health care costs, it was $7 billion last year. There we go. We found our money. All we've got to do is improve people's health, make them live longer, and we save money by doing it.
When you invest in, I consider education, healthcare, quality of life issues. And so whenever you improve quality of life issues, it's a domino effect, meaning that it lessens the burden on your healthcare system. When you have healthier people, when your public education system is performing well, then that creates more opportunity for your high school graduates and going into college. It improves their ranking when they go off to college. And then quality of life issues are about attracting people to Texas and allowing them to stay in the communities in which they grew up and raised. We here in McLennan County, we suffer from, we have a lot of very talented young people that grow up and go off and get educations, but for whatever reason, it's particularly with minority students, they don't come back and continue to be part of the community because they see more, see opportunity outside the community. And I want us to create communities and counties and a state that allows opportunity for everyone throughout the state. They don't have to go to urban areas to realize the opportunities that they've earned through their educational experience.
Well, the reason they're going to urban areas and stuff is access to health care and for income. Let's face it, we're paying our people $7.25 an hour when the minimum wage, if it just kept up with inflation since the last time it was passed, would be $15 an hour. We should really work towards $15 an hour. There should be no such thing as a working poor classification. It just shouldn't happen. But you really brought up economic development and public education. Do you remember when Amazon was considering moving its corporate headquarters to Texas? Mm-hmm. They were looking at several cities in Texas. They were going to move to Texas. And they didn't make that decision. They decided to move to New York. And you know what their number one reason for moving to New York was? Texas wasn't committed to public education. If you're bringing in 10,000 employees, they're going to have 20,000 kids. And the first thing they care about is, what's my kid's education going to be? The same as we do, same as all of us do. And the opportunities were just better somewhere else. So we missed out on that deal. And there's lots of deals. If you look at where our economic development has gone over the last 20 years, it goes to those areas like Plano and Keller, those areas in North Lake now, those areas that have a reputation of good public education are the best that we can do in Texas. And we can certainly do a whole lot better.
Absolutely, it speaks to our competitiveness as a state. And you bring up an opportunity. You bring up Amazon, and Amazon has I think they've adopted a policy as a company that they have a minimum wage that they pay their workers that are around $15 an hour. Don't quote me, but I think it's
I
around.
think you're right.
I think that's their company standard. And so when we as a community um, lose out to states like New York and California and Georgia and all these other places, those companies provide opportunity for our local economies and our local government. Because as far as I know, there are not many people who make $7 an hour that can afford property and then turn around and afford to pay taxes and so on and so forth. A $15 an hour job, if that's the minimum pay, then that gives someone an opportunity to earn what I consider a livable wage and then to really contribute to our economy. Because going back to that $7 an hour person, they end up being subsidized by the government in some capacity, whether it be for food, housing, so on and so forth. So why should we, as taxpayers, subsidize Walmart and other companies, subsidize their workers with social services when the answer is them paying their employees a livable wage? What could we do, Robert, to in the legislature to address that?
Well, the legislature has the ability to set the minimum wage. A number of states have. Washington and Oregon and a lot of the western states and the New England states have already raised the minimum wage. Mm-hmm. Texas is just lagging behind, again, because we don't have the will and the desire to do that. But we need to, because you couple the lack of minimum wage, the lack of a livable wage, with a lack of health care, with the quality of the public education, and Texans are really suffering. We're not the exceptional state that we used to be, and that's because of a decade or more of one-party rule that's more interested in answering to the people that fund them, to the people that put them in power. It's just like my candidate. 8 people in a district this large have contributed to his campaign. He's not answering to us. He's not answering to you. He's answering to those people that gave him that $700,000, and that's Pax and Exxon and Chevron and Mobil and the Koch brothers and the Wilkes family and Empower Texans.
I can honestly say he's not very visible in our community here in McLennan County.
Can I tell you a story?
Go ahead. Sure.
I went to an educational forum over in Cleveland. It was called the Raise Your Hand Educational Forum. And they invited both people running for the House and both people running for the Senate to show up and deal with public education. Now, it was a nonpartisan event. There was questions asked by school teachers and principals. And Brian Birdwell didn't show up. I didn't think he would, but he didn't show up. But the newspaper did an article about it, and they had the pictures of all the candidates in the front page of the paper. And they had a wrong picture for Brian Birdwell. And so I called the reporter, and I said, you don't know that you have the wrong picture for Brian Birdwell? He goes, oh, I asked all around the newsroom. Nobody had ever seen him. We weren't sure.
Well, I've seen him one time in my life, and it was at a event where my sister was honored as a volunteer, and I'll say though he did attend, he was largely unrecognizable by most of the people there. No one at my table knew who he was until he was introduced, and so
again, don't feel bad.
so maybe that's by design. But someone who is a state senator who has tremendous influence in what happens in our state, should be representing us and should be in a position to get feedback from our communities, especially the communities that he represents. And that's why I'm so thankful that as a candidate, you decided to reach out and make who Robert Vick is visible to our audience. Now, I want to, I went to your website, Robert, and I want to say that when I looked at your rap, for those of you who all would like to know, it is Vick for Texas.com. I believe that's what it is. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's Vick for Senate. Vick for Senate.com. And so and you had some very important items that are very important to me on your platform. Some of which we've already talked about a bit, but I just wanted to go through them so that people can understand what your priorities are, and we can address them. The ones that we haven't spoken. We've talked a lot about public education, and you've mentioned that. We've talked a lot about healthcare, but one that's near and dear to me because I am a union member is labor rights, and you have labor rights listed as part of your platform. Now, in Texas, that labor rights is not something that is brought to the forefront, and I think that's by design, because we're a right to work state, things of that nature. But I personally benefit from being part of a strong union and having labor rights. And so, why did you add labor rights to your platform here in Texas?
Well, you have to realize too that even though unions are very concerned about their members and their salaries and their payrolls and everything else, when a union gets concessions and gets benefits and stuff, it benefits every worker in Texas, not just the union member. When the union gets an increase in wages, an increase in salaries, or fights to change the minimum wage laws, we all benefit from what they accomplish and stuff. Unions have been the backbone of providing us with a safe work environment. It's just absolutely essential in Texas because we have so many dangerous industries and dangerous businesses in the oil fields and oil extraction and all the rest of the things that we do. And Texans, this may be something you don't really realize and not many people do realize. Texas is a manufacturing powerhouse. We are the largest manufacturing state in the country. And the way we became that way is by clean energy. We manufacture more Energy Star appliances than any other state and in most countries right here in Texas. And so those are good union wages, union workers doing the right thing. And it's lifting all boats. It's lifting all of us. It's giving us better health care. It's giving us better wages. It's doing everything for us. So labor rights are really important to me. Now, Texas and its right to work laws and the way that they do, and they, my opponent's been constantly trying to do away with union and union rights and labor rights, always asking and trying to introduce legislation so that you as a union worker can't have your wages deducted from your paycheck. You have to write them a check and send them in. They make it just as difficult as they can. So worker rights are very important.
Absolutely. And I think worker rights really at their foundation are tied to wages, in my opinion. Because the one way to negotiate a livable wage would be through collective bargaining. And when you don't have collective bargaining, I think it puts the worker at a disadvantage when you talk about obtaining a livable wage, because the company or the management always has the worker over a barrel. And with that being the situation, wages constantly fall behind in Texas, especially in our small communities.
Well, and you brought up a good point and stuff. We were talking earlier about how poorly teachers are paid in Texas. Teachers do not have the right to collectively bargain. It's just a fact. And there's a great example of what happens when you don't have collective bargaining.
And I work for the, and I'll bring up an issue that I have with school districts and how they're funded and things of that nature related to teachers, and it's really entire district employees. They have teachers who are underpaid, who pay really high insurance premiums.
Yes,
But they also have custodial and food service workers who make substantially less than teachers, and they are offered those same benefit packages that the teachers can't afford, and so therefore, certainly, a lot of our school staff elect not to. Well, they can't afford those benefits. So then you have a situation. You have a situation in our state where our school districts are underpaying our our food staff, our paraprofessionals, our custodians, and they're in a large part they're on subsidies, and there should be no reason a person endeavors to be a teacher or a custodian or a lunchroom worker or a aide in a classroom should be a burden to the system and underpaid. And so, if you're absolutely right, if there was collectively bargaining for teachers, then there would be collective bargaining for custodial workers. Then there would be collective bargaining for lunchroom workers. It would all trickle up, so to speak, and everybody would have rights. But denying teachers that rights ultimately puts all those other workers at a distinct disadvantage.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Rocky. You hit it perfectly.
Okay, I also wanted to bring out look something that's not listed on your website.
What?
But well, I mean, but I wanted to, but I know it's important. But you have already mentioned it somewhat. But I wanted you to elaborate on it. Is what is your thoughts about criminal justice reform in Texas?
Well, finally, it's out into the open again. Like I said earlier, we've been fighting this battle for 55 years for civil rights and equal rights. It's been going on for a long time. And finally, it's coming out. And what you're seeing is folks like Breonna Taylor. She was in the wrong place. George Floyd. He was killed over $20. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old playing with a toy. This whole thing has to end. And it was really enlightening to a lot of folks to get involved with the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that's one of the most wonderful universal movements I've seen in a long, long, long time. I'm just so very encouraged by what I saw and the number of young people that I saw. And unlike the early parts of the civil rights movement, when it was kind of vague, we're all out there looking for integration of society. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? But we never did get specific. And so it's time for us to really get specific on dealing with this situation. We're not talking about defunding the police. We're talking about reducing the police's military role and quit asking them to be social workers and to be counselors and to, be soldiers and all the rest of the things. But it's all about local control. Just today, Abbott and Patrick got together and said that any city that defunds the police department in their city, that they are going to freeze the property taxes and not allow that community to raise any more taxes. So they take all this control away so that we as citizens don't have any say so and make all those decisions in Austin. But in criminal justice reform, it has to be real serious and severe. The biggest problem we have, and this affects people of color more than anybody, is the bail bond system.
Absolutely.
Bond system. You can go out and commit a misdemeanor, like George Floyd, pass a $20 bill, that should be a ticket. But instead, you get arrested, you go to jail, you put on a $2,000 bond or $20,000 bond, you can't pay bond. What happens? Well, you can't pay bond. You eventually lose your job because you're not going to work. You're going to lose your apartment. You're going to lose your house. There's a possibility of losing your family and everything falling apart because you can't pay. So you really want to get before a judge. Because of the pandemic, we haven't had a jury trial in Texas since March. So you've been sitting in jail since March on a misdemeanor or a small non-violent offense, losing everything in your life. So if you really want to deal with the situation, you may say, okay, I'll just plead guilty so I can get out and go save my house, go save my family. You plead guilty. Well, then you're cut off from any federal grants and student loans for the rest of your life. And they've just chopped you off at the knees for the rest of your life for something that shouldn't be. We shouldn't be putting people in jail on minor offenses that can be released on their own recognizance, that aren't doing violent offenses or criminal offenses. Now, marijuana reform is a big part of that. We put 2,000 people in jail last year for marijuana in Texas. You could smoke a joint, get caught, lose your job, lose your house, lose everything. For what?
and the crazy thing about that is we're putting 2,000 people in prison last year for marijuana offenses, and Colorado made over $4 billion in tax revenue for marijuana. Something about that does not seem right, and I think obviously when you talk about the $5 billion deficit that we have in our educational system, I think that $4 billion that Colorado made could help out. And with us being a much more populous state, much bigger state, who knows what our revenue would be from cannabis reform or the legalization of marijuana. And so it makes no sense to me for us to create a system that we ultimately put. Going back to what you said about the no bail system, about the bail system. The bail system, what it does is it puts a barrel over the head of poor residents who are poor citizens who are charged with crimes. They have no incentive to fight on their own behalf, but they have every incentive to plead guilty by virtue of the fact of the burden that's put on them by the system. Not whether or not they did the crime or not. That's not being addressed. It's the burden that the system puts them under that requires them to plead guilty or not guilty. I commend those communities who have eliminated the bail system, because to me that's one of the most unfair things that happen in society. When you think about a guy can be charged with a victimless crime, right? Can be put in jail. Then he has to pay someone to get him out. Now, the person he's paying to get him out already has money, probably with some of the wealthier people in the community. And he has to pay him to stay out. And that just seems there's something really fundamentally unfair about that, is that you don't have any problem with letting him out. You just want to make sure that he pays a rich guy in order to get out, and that's fundamentally unfair in my opinion.
And if you've been sitting there for 5 months, you may go ahead and cop a plea just
Absolutely.
to get out. If you've been there for 5 months, whether you're guilty or not, it's just an unfair and broken system. And, like marijuana reform, I mean, 23 states now is non-criminal or legalized. Texas should definitely legalize cannabis, tax it, regulate it, and control it. Just like Colorado does, and the benefits that they've received from it. We could easily, and in fact, I'm proposing that we earmark those funds that we collect from it for veteran services, veterans affairs, and public education.
I mean, that's a great idea, because being a veteran, I could definitely, you know, I see a lot of my comrades who I serve with in need of veteran services, and in a lot of our communities, our homeless veteran population is growing exponentially, and so and that shouldn't be the case after they've served their country and you know and given up the risk their lives for our freedom. And so we should be able to provide adequate service for them. We should be able to provide a quality education for our children. Now, marijuana aside, we should do those things regardless of whether or not marijuana is legal or not. But
Oh yeah.
when it becomes the fiscal issue, and that's what the Republicans often bring up. Yeah, we'd love to provide a great education. We'd love to provide for the veterans. And the next question is, but who's going to pay for it? And so when you give them a vehicle in which they could raise the revenue to provide these services that our communities desperately need, then what is their answer? Their answer is to do nothing. And so it's very frustrating as a citizen to sit back and watch our state and neglect the people who are most in need. Hey, the reality is, Robert, the people who are most in need depend on the system to provide services for them. And what is happening here in our state is that people that are in desperate need of services and resources, our state is sitting around. Our state senator is not doing anything to address those needs. And so it's very frustrating and unfortunate.
Well, you have to realize too that it's in his best interest not to do that. When this last legislative session, when it came up that there was ample evidence that marijuana is a treatment for PTSD, and that is a substitute for the opioids, and substitute for a lot of other drugs, and it has a successful record of treating it. They were turned down, and Senator Birdwell, he came up and made some comment that legalizing it for soldiers and for veterans with PTSD was a slippery slope that we're not going to go down. And then it wasn't but a couple of months later where he gets big campaign contributions from every pharmaceutical industry in the country. And that's what it is. It's what's in his interest is what he works for, not what's in our interest. And it just shows time after time after time. It was the same with gambling. When you get down in these smaller counties and stuff, horse racing, quarter horses and thoroughbred horses, big business. The horse tracks are going busto in Texas. They're having big problems. They're having a lot of problems with the horse industry and stuff. So the horse industry wants to put gaming machines inside a horse tracks so that you could go in there. They were calling them vintage race machines or something, where you could go in and bet on a machine inside of a horse track and stuff. And our legislature turned it down. And Brian Birdwell, of course, voted against that and all. And then a couple of months later, he receives all these campaign contributions from Indian tribes in Oklahoma that own casinos. And I don't know about you. I've snuck into Oklahoma a time or two myself and been up to WinStar, which started out as a Quonset hut 10 years ago, which is now the largest casino in the world. And you're hard to find any Texas, any other license tag but Texas in that parking lot too.
I've been there several times, and I must say, you're absolutely right. When you go look at the parking lot, just this past November, I took a ride through the parking lot and went and looked. I'll say, well, let me try. I'm gonna count how many Oklahoma plates are here. Well, I tell you what, Robert, I rode for about 5 minutes and didn't find one. I gave up. And so I'm sure there were some, but there were none. I didn't find any. And what that tells me is we're supporting that industry in Oklahoma. Oklahoma charges, I play a little blackjack. Oklahoma charges 50 cents a hand for each hand that each player plays in blackjack. We're providing, we're a great sugar daddy to the state of Oklahoma, whereas our kids and our citizens are in desperate need of services such as health care and education. It's unfortunate, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, it's the same thing as we have tried over and over again since prohibition to legislate morality, and it does not work. It just over and over and over again. The war of drugs, we've been fighting that thing for 40 years now. How's that working out for us? It's not. We've got to quit treating all these things as criminal issues, as moral issues, and start treating them more as public health issues, and start dealing with the underlying causes of the problems, and realize too that there's economic benefits to dealing these. There's no reason you need to go to Oklahoma to gamble, or Colorado to get a joint. That's ludicrous. It's just not benefiting the residents of Texas at all.
And the underserved communities fall behind as we go spend our money in those other areas, and it's like I said again, it's quite unfortunate that we don't seize opportunities to raise revenue to provide in those areas where we are definitely lacking.
Well, Rocky, I read a study the other day that said over the 10 years, if we were to expand Medicaid in Texas, it would bring in $100 billion to the Texas economy in 10 years.
Wow.
Because healthcare costs go down. That right now, anybody that's working, they pay their taxes, they pay their federal taxes, and that goes to support people in Tennessee and Oklahoma and pay for their health care in Louisiana and stuff. Whereas we can't. And so we just need to bring our money back home. Bring it back from Oklahoma, bring it back from healthcare, bring it back.
So the expansion of Medicare, as you understand it, is it just a political issue?
Yes, it's absolutely a political issue. It is only a Texas political issue. In fact, just this last 2 weeks ago, Missouri voted to increase Medicaid. When the Affordable Care Act passed, and they said, okay, we're going to allow you to expand Medicare, and the federal government will pick up the tab for it since we're already collecting the taxes for it. So if you as a state don't like it and want to opt out again, you can quit. So far, 37 states plus the District of Columbia have opted into Medicaid, and not one of them have opted out because they're finding that they save money, they save lives, they reduce property taxes, and it's a good deal for everybody.
Well, like I don't know the number, but for a state the size of Texas, I think it's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're turning down, and so and we have the largest uncovered population in the state. I mean, in the 48 states. When you talk about sheer numbers of people that don't have health care insurance, there's no reason why we should be. Matter of fact, to be honest with you, we can't afford to turn down $100 million as a state toward health care.
We could put it to good use somewhere.
and like you mentioned at the very start of our interview, is that it creates a burden on us, local governments, because one of the large, unpaid, our healthcare system, one of the largest write-offs is unpaid healthcare bill.
Right. And, it's actually more than that. It goes much deeper than that. There's 4.5 million people who would benefit in Texas from the expansion of Medicaid. Now, that's a lot. There are also 1.6 million of those people are really caught in a hard place because they make too much to qualify under the Affordable Care Act and make way too much to be covered by Medicaid. So if you fall in that little no man's zone through there and you get sick, That's where our bankruptcies come. We lead the country in bankruptcy for medical expenses. It just trickles all the way down throughout our society and costs us all to have to deal with that situation. And it's very solvable. You know, I mean,
So definitely. Is there any, Robert, is there any specific issues that you would like to take to the legislature and address within our specific constituency, being the from District 22? Is there something that you want to take and have addressed that would is a priority of yours and that is desperately needed within our district?
well, yeah. And again, we're going back to healthcare a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
You know, we do have these little 9 rural counties in that part of Tarrant County. You know, you guys aren't so rural over here, but
Yeah.
you know, the rest of these counties are. We have seen 20 rural hospitals close in the last 10 years in Texas. So the folks that are living in these rural areas and in these smaller areas, you know, not only do they don't have access to health care, they didn't have access to health care if they could pay for it. The hospitals are closing, they're failing because they can't make the money to stay in business. You know, rural folks tend to be a little more unhealthy, to be a little more overweight, tend to have more health problems, live less than us urban dwellers and stuff too. And they tend to be a little more sicker than we are. So, you know, we're having to pick up the cost for all of that as a burden to all of us taxpayers in the state of Texas, when it could be really solved. The hospitals could be shored up. We could keep from losing hospitals, keep doctors engaged, keep Texans healthier if we just deal with Medicaid. And it's not a political issue. I mean, Tennessee did it. You know, Kentucky's done it. Louisiana's done it. Missouri's done it. These are Republican states. These are good, solid Republican states. You know.
Can I tell you a quick story about I heard this in a campaign speech. Someone was running for office in Kentucky several years ago, maybe around, I think 2016, maybe 2014. I can't remember, somewhere around there. And they were running for office, and they were talking about they were rolling out the healthcare plan that has been instituted and how good it was, and how, you know, Kentucky had taken, you know, advantage of the expansion of Medicare. And he said, and one of the people in the crowd said, "Yeah, we got something way better than that Obamacare. We got Kentucky Care," which was essentially Obamacare rebranded. You know, it was exactly the same law, but Kentucky chose to rebrand their marketplace, and so therefore, I guess it was accepted. It was more widely accepted. But it's amazing to me is that a you know, these were you know, largely Republican communities they were talking about in Kentucky, and how receptive they were to Kentucky Care or whatever they were calling it, and they would you know, protest Obamacare. And so it's just quite unfortunate that we've made healthcare a political issue, and really in a lot of cases misinformed the public about what the Affordable Care Act was designed to do.
Yeah, we did. And, you know, let's face it, in 2008, when we elected a black president, a lot of folks in this country just went flat crazy. And, you know, that's how we felt Donald Trump, and we've not recovered it yet.
Well, again, I must say, you know, when you talk about, you know, I was very proud in 2008 when President Obama was elected president. It gave me a sense of pride, not only as a black man but as an American, that he was elected president. It gave me an unbelievable hope as to what direction our country was going in. However, I think we've had a setback to some degree these last 4 years. Uh,
That's an
again,
understatement, Roger.
uh, and so, and I think, unfortunately, people like your opponent, who are running for, who are incumbents, having accepted Donald Trump as somewhat of a role model, and continue to neglect those populations that need help the most. And so I'm looking forward to you being elected to Texas Senate, and bringing the concerns of McLennan County and District 22 to the legislature, because it's desperately needed.
But and what we really need to do in Texas, what really needs to happen and stuff, is we need to vote. We need to really
Absolutely.
get out there and vote. Yeah. And we're not talking about just everybody doesn't like Donald Trump. Okay, I get that and stuff. But we need to clean everything up from the courthouse to the state house to the White House. There's a lot of work to do. And it's not that Texas is a Democrat or Republican state. Texas is a non-voting state.
Absolutely.
And, if I could take just a minute more of your time and stuff.
Okay, as much as you like, Robert. We're here. This is what we're here for.
Well, I went to a couple of Black Lives Matter events and stuff, and I was one in Glen Rose, and I was going to be one of the speakers down there. So I started looking at things that I had noticed. I'd been to Hillsboro. We had a couple in Granbury, and I began noticing all these young people that were showing up. The one in Glen Rose was even organized by high school girls. It was really heartening to see all these young people out there. So I started looking. I kind of like numbers and like figuring that political stuff out. So I looked, and in 2016, the millennials and the Generation Xers voted at the rate of 21%. Now the baby boomers voted at the rate of 65%. Okay, now we know what happened in 2016. We got Donald Trump, we got a Republican House, we got a Republican Senate, we got all this mess we've had for the last 3.5, 4 years. But in 2018, I started looking at the numbers. Now we flipped 7 governorships and 9 or 10 state legislatures. We took back the House of Representatives. And I started looking at these same millennials, the same Generation Xers, and they voted at 42%. A big increase. They doubled their turnout from 2016 to 2018. And look what happened. We got a better world for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You bring up something that I've been saying for a long time, Robert. It's about voting. It's about marching. It's about protesting. It's about getting your voice heard. But it's mostly about voting, because without the vote, without getting those people from the protest grounds to the polls, we don't have a chance in changing our future here in Texas and America, for that matter. And we must make voting a priority among whatever your issue is across all demographics. We must get as many people out to vote as possible. In our community, in the Black community, we participate at a much lower rate than other communities in Texas. And unfortunately, our Hispanic brothers and sisters vote at an even much lower rate. So if we want our voices heard and we want our concerns met by the state legislature and the federal government, it's incumbent that we go out and vote across all demographics, all age groups, and we make sure our voice is heard. I can tell you this: if we vote at 75%, when you talk about African Americans, Hispanics, we can make sure that Robert Vick is the next state senator for District 22. But if we continue along the same trend that has been in the past, as a candidate, you may be the best candidate in the world, Robert, but without the support of the people, it won't happen.
And what's really interesting about this, and let's be real honest. As you look at me, here I am. I'm a boomer. I'm one of these late boomers. That's what it is. But young folks, these millennials, Generation X, Generation Y, you're going to inherit the world from me in just a few years. Well, if you're going to inherit the world from me in a few years, why don't you just step up and start running it now? Please come on and vote. And there's a great new way to register people to vote. It's at texasdemocrats.org. And you go to texasdemocrats.org and you click on register to vote. And you fill out a little simple form, real easy, name and address and stuff. And you hit submit. It's then converted into a voter registration application, and it's packaged up with an envelope addressed to your election administrator in your community, and it's got a stamp on the envelope, and it's mailed to you. When you get it, you simply open it up, sign it, close it, give it back to your mailman, and you're registered to vote. It's gotten that easy. So you got no excuses not to register.
And you said that's TexasDemocrats.org.
O-R-G.
Okay, I'm trying to do some tech stuff .org, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna let it run as a ticker while we wrap up, because I think that is very important. Matter of fact, that's probably the most important thing we've said tonight. Register to vote at www.texasdemocrats.org. Yes,
that's it.
Yeah, so
it could be easier.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things. We have to register more people than we've ever registered before. We have to encourage people to vote at extraordinary numbers. As the president of the McLennan County chapter of the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats, we're going to do everything to get our people out to vote, get voter education, register as many people as possible. We're in the process of developing our strategic plan and then going out and implementing that. And we want to work hand in hand with candidates like you, Robert, in order to make that happen. So make sure that your people stay in contact with me so that we can make sure that we provide you with any support that you need in assisting us working together, getting out to vote, because it's a very, very, very important mission of our chapter, because we want to increase the voting, especially in the Black community here in McLennan County.
Well, you've been around long enough. Every time there's an election, somebody will come up to you and say, "Boy, this is the most important election of my lifetime." But now, if you don't think that this is not the most important election in your lifetime, you got a problem. I mean, we really do have to turn this ship around, and we're counting on everybody. We've got to be in this whole thing together.
All right, Robert, if there is one last thing you want to leave people with before you get out of here, what would it be?
Well, I would like for you to go to my website and take a look. It's vickforsenate.com, and just take a look at the issues on climate control, on the issues that are really important to us in criminal justice reform and cannabis reform and public education and in labor rights and stuff. And you'll find out that we have an awful lot in common. And it's not a new thing with me. It's not something I came to Jesus over the last couple of months. It's something I've been working at all my life. Never been a candidate, but I know that we can do better. And that's why I'm in this race. And I'm in it to win it. And I can only do it with your help.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. Again, I want to commend your campaign for reaching out to me and doing this podcast. I think you've imparted a lot of knowledge on our audience, and your time has been well spent this evening. And I want to personally thank you for coming out and joining us. Hey,
I'd
folks,
like to thank you for all you do too, Rocky.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. Well, guys, if you have any questions for Robert, Put them in the comments. If I can't answer them, I'll make sure I'll tag him in and make sure that he answers them.
Well,
Um, we have a I could go on and on, but again, the main thing, if you don't get anything out of this, the main thing is go vote. And I also want to mention that it'll be a little different in past years. In past years, you could select the Democratic ticket, and then you could down everybody who was a Democrat on your ballot would be selected. This year is the first year that it won't be like that. So you will have to go down the ballot and select Robert Vick for State Senate District 22. So make sure you remember that name, Robert Vick. And we're out of here. All right. Let me end the